Hello, welcome to the Honest Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. This is me right here, and we're doing a pre-recorded video with the gorgeous man who you can see on screen. This is Mr. Simon Hall. Hello, sir. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Before we get started, I just want to thank everyone on the Honest Wargamer Patreon, and if you are listening to this as a podcast, make sure you stay hydrated. And now I want to talk about you. So I asked you for this interview, which is something I'm not doing much at the minute because I'm quite busy with the live stream and stuff, but we got to have a big chat at CanCon, and we saw you play on the final game on stream, potentially for the win of CanCon against the very talented Jimmy Page with your Cities of Sigmar list. And I just wanted to know all about you. So tell me who you are, what you're about.
So I'm Simon Hall. I'm 34 years old, father of two. I've got a 9-year-old and an 11-week-old.
Congratulations.
Profession.
Wow.
Yeah, profession. I was an intensive care doctor until 5 days ago, and now I'm in a non-clinical role. So essentially it just means I do paperwork and figure out how the health system runs. And yeah, I've been playing Warhammer since 40k since 2nd edition. So that was back in, don't even know what, 1993 I think I started playing. And through until 2009, when I kind of changed to Warhammer 7th edition, did quite well locally. I came onto the scene in my first tournament and beat a couple of the ETC players, which, for me as a first-time tournament goer was actually quite, a big achievement. Obviously, well, it would be for anyone. And then kind of did well in the scene in 7th, got up to, I think, 3rd in the country on the rankings at one point. That was the highest that I achieved. And then essentially 8th came around and everything changed. So I played 8th for a little while. It didn't really take my fancy, so I was part of the big shift into War Machine at that point, which I think happened in the UK as well, but it absolutely devastated the Warhammer scene in Australia for a long time. But I was part of the problem. I went to War Machine, did quite well in War Machine, won, as we spoke about before, won one of the CanCon years. I think it was 2015. Was invited to play over in America, but because I was at med school at the time, I couldn't go. I had an exam that would literally be the day after I got back from the States. So I had to unfortunately pull the plug on that one. And yeah, got into Age of Sigmar for CanCon last year. So I played a few games before that, borrowed an army from a guy called Dean, who's a Brisbane local. Just borrowed the Spider Army. I think I don't know if I spoke to you, but definitely spoke to Dan Shorts last year. And it was a fun army to play. I came like 60 something, but 4-2 maybe. It was good for a first CanCon.
Yeah, and also for a pure Spider Fang army. I remember actually seeing that army. I also want to shout out and say you definitely are someone perfect to interviewing the Honest Wargamer, as there are some dogs in the background. Yes. that makes you the perfect Honest Wargamer, not only interviewee, but a member. So I just want to cycle back a little bit before we do. Oh, there they are. Hello. For the podcast listeners, you're missing out on a very cute dog. Please watch this on YouTube or on Twitch. I want to cycle back a little bit and ask what it is about wargaming. So obviously Warhammer, War Machine Hordes, like a bunch of other stuff. What is it about wargaming that particularly excites your mind? I know some people, especially people who haven't been in the hobby particularly long or ever played at a competitive level, a lot of hobbyists, sometimes they don't see it. What is it that really makes your mind get part of it? Are you just really competitively focused, or is there something more?
So I used to be very competitively focused. That was my main draw back in the day, and I guess it's most of my draw back in the day now. But I used to play it when I was a kid because I enjoyed it. It was Space Marines. I got into it with Space Crusade. I don't know if you've ever played the board game, but that was how I got into the game in the first place. That and Hero Quest. And I guess that it's that kind of tactile element of it that you're not playing. Like, I've played some competitive computer games, but never to the level of any tabletop war game. I honestly think it's just the tactile thing. You're moving things around. You're engaging with your opponent on the tabletop. You're having a conversation, you're making mates. It's just I think actually reflecting on it, the community is probably a big part of it. I've got a lot of lifelong friends that I've made from wargaming that even though none of us play the game system anymore, we still play board games together fairly regularly or hang out together, do that kind of stuff. So the community now is probably the biggest part for me, but originally it was getting in and testing myself against the best of the best, because I like to solve puzzles, and I see tabletop wargaming as a puzzle that needs solving.
Yeah, I find that I find that one of the key distinctions, I think, and similar story to you. I used to play a lot of computer games, and then when I discovered Warhammer, that was it. I was out, and the tactile nature. But I would also say that that there's that almost chaotic level of permutations that are available to a game system, and also to what happens on the tabletop, right? With the dice rolls that really change things up. I got to ask about the shift, obviously, into Age of Sigmar from games that are a little bit more formulaic, as we may have seen with 7th and 8th edition. I know you didn't play 8th edition, but those more you go, I go games. How do you find the priority roll? How do you find the idea that the game can take huge swings either way? Like, how does that factor into your thinking going into games?
So, the priority roll, a big point of contention with a lot of people. Everybody has their opinion on what they want done with it, or how it should happen. If it should even be in the game at all. The big thing, and for 5 out of my 6 games at CanCon, this was true, is that if you go second, there is a 0% chance of your opponent doubling you. And you just can't argue with that stat. So in basically every single one of my games, I want to go second because I control the flow of the game. I'm the one that gets to double. And it's usually, especially with the army that I was playing at CanCon, you only need one double and the game's over. And it all comes down to a dice roll, which is you have a 40% chance as a second player to take the double. I can't remember what the exact stats are, but it's not an insignificant amount. And so you basically get to choose how the game flows, in my opinion, by taking second and going second.
Okay, yeah, I don't agree with that statement, but that's good. I like hearing different opinions always. I think that you can always play around it. It's a little bit more difficult when some of the armies are more polarized, but I think the smart play is to always try and give the turn away where possible until there's the opportunity that you want to take it, right? And a really good example of that is to cast Geminids into the second turn, get the turn, and then just give them the turn, and then put Geminids through their army. Easiest play in the world, solves 9 out of 10 problems in my opinion. But it's nice to hear a different thought. Do you find Age of Sigmar more dynamic because of the priority roll, or do you think it's something that actually you have to really consciously think about in your army design?
I don't think about it in my army design, but that may be at the moment because my main block is 30 Phoenix Guard, and whether you're attacking or defending, they're just amazing.
Unless they're getting shot.
Unless they're getting shot by flamers and horrors and all that. And if you can't roll dice rolls to save your life.
So what was your... So leading up to this CanCon, and spoiler alert, obviously you took Cities of Sigmar. What is it about the approach? Was this, I want to do well at this event? Was that your approach?
I think that's always in the back of your mind. You always want to do well. I consider myself to be a list builder. So I like to build things that aren't commonplace and run them and stress test them and see how they go. And so the thought with this army was that nobody was running Hammerhawk. Everyone says it's shit. The people that were running it with the battalion with the 3 units of Demigryph Knights and the dude on Griffin. And I didn't think that was the optimal build. And so I wanted to test that hypothesis, basically.
Okay, so you wanted to test it. What is it about that particular build that attracted you? What did you think it did? And approaching the game as a cohesive meta, what is it that you saw and thought it would be good against?
So if someone takes the first turn and tries to alpha you, or gets off a few shots against you or something like that, everything in your deployment zone is immune to battle shock. And that is just such a huge thing in this game. So when I was playing Gloomspite for the majority of the last 12 months, battle shock was such a major thing. You basically had to deploy your entire army around the Loon Shrine. You had to spend command points that you weren't... you were generating a fair few because you got Fungoids and you got Scragrot. But I wasn't generating enough because I was spending them all to stop battle shock from happening. And so the way that I looked at this list was that it was command point efficiency. If you're not spending any points on Battle Shock, you're able to spend them on more things, and then you have an opportunity in that list by that you then can spend those command points on fighting twice. So that's kind of the double benefit of using Hammerhall. And in the CanCon, the CanCon pack was taken into account as well in the fact that there were none of those scenarios where there is any dead space. So I think Border War is one of them where you have the two triangles at the end and the rest of the board is dead space. So they didn't have any of those scenarios in the pack. They were all half of the board is red, half of the board is blue. So your allegiance effects are always in effect.
Which is really nice, and again, a good tip to anyone listening: if you are going to an event, make sure you read the pack if the events are published in there. It might give you some clue as to what to take, especially if there are hero-heavy missions or something like that. So let's talk about your list.
Exactly.
What was in it, and so would you say it was the scenarios that defined what you were going to put in your list more than the armies that you might play against?
So I didn't know exactly what I was playing against. My philosophy when making a list in the current edition is this list is actually a deviation from what I wanted to take. So actually I should probably give some backstory. So originally what I was going to take before the new KO book came out was a shooting list, essentially that revolved around a mass unit of 40 Arkanauts that I would hit with the Aether Chemist to give extra shots in their skyhooks. And then I would give that. Essentially, they'd be 2s to hit, reroll 1s, and then 2s to wound. With how many skyhooks did they used to be able to take? 24. Yeah. So, sorry, 12. You could take 12 and you get 24 shots, and they were 2s to hit, 2s to wound, -2 D3 damage. And so that with a Soul Screen Bridge in Tempest Eye, that was the list that I was going to run. And then the KO book came out, and Clint ruled that the KO book, the new one, would be used for CanCon. And that was about a week before list submission. We can talk about that point later. Pre-FAQ books in tournaments. But that changed my entire list design. And coupled with the fact that I had an army getting painted over in Poland that was sent at the end of December and was meant to arrive before January, I kind of submitted a list in the end that I had played previously, but I also knew that I could borrow if my army didn't come. So shout out to Charles Black, Chuck, who you've met a few times, who's an absolute legend, who lent me his models so that I could play, because otherwise I wouldn't have even been on the table because I wouldn't have had models.
Yeah, Chuck's a big legend.
3 days ago.
Been a big supporter of the show. Can't thank him enough.
Yep.
Okay, so carry on with the backstory. Sorry, please continue.
Yeah, so the FAQ came out. The KO book came out. Clint said we could use it regardless of FAQ status. So those of you that have seen the book know that the Aether Chemist got whacked with the Nerf bat compared to what he previously did, and the Arkanauts are now nowhere near as good. Oh, it was a change that we all knew were going to happen. Hang on, I'm just going to grab one thing for visual effect.
Okay, please do. I'm very excited about this. Who doesn't want visual aids?
So visual aids. So these are 12 light skyhooks that have been 3D printed. So these were going on Arkanaut models until that book came out.
Oh, heartbreak.
Yeah. So
also, how good are those 3D printing companies now for the extra bits?
So it was $2 Australian per skyhook, and they're 3D printed resin. So I mean, it's not bad compared to like the bits shops that you can go to.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But yeah, so that list got canned. I've got a different list to run now in a similar build to that. But the list for CanCon was models that I could use, models that Chuck had, and I had this thought in the back of my head for a while that I would play this list because I am a fan of the old world. I played Empire throughout, and Celestion Prime is Carfran's Reborn. I think is that solidified in the fluff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some people say Cetra, but he's not. He's Carfran's. And then, well, he's got Almaraz. He's got to be Carfran's, right?
Well, Carfran's actually was Sigmar all along, like in the end times.
See, I quit before the end times.
So the comet coming through the sky was actually Sigmar's soul that had been trapped up there. Carfran's effectively dies. Sigmar's soul enters him. Sigmar, and then Sigmar / Carfran's.
Did he consent to that?
Pardon me?
Did he consent to that?
I'm not sure. The Old World was a pretty murky place, including the Mirkwood, and then he held on to the Old World as he died, as he fell into the pit. Okay. And then took it with him. Yeah. So that's kind of anyway.
All I remember is that it's all what's the Mortarch that likes? What's his name? He's the one that ruined the Old World. Manfred. He's the worst. It's confirmed on one of GW's community articles.
He is the worst.
Manfred is the worst.
He is the worst.
Anyway, I wanted to use Celestion Prime. I've been trying to look for ways to make him work for a while. And I saw Hammerhall. He gets the Cities of Sigmar keyword. He gets the Hammerhall keyword. He can fight twice. Initially, so after that, you remember in that recent FAQ came out with the Celestion Prime that said that it confirmed what everyone thought how his rule worked, but it just completely misworded it again and needed a further FAQ that hasn't been forthcoming.
Yes.
So I thought that he gained +2 attacks every turn that he was in the sky. So not every time you choose for him to be in the sky, but every turn that he's in the sky. And so he gets the ludicrous amounts of attacks if you take the rule that way, which is technically how it's worded. But I approached Clint before the tournament and said, "Is this how it works?" And he's like, "No, that would be stupid." And admittedly, it would be.
So that's good. But he was always another good piece of advice is always ask the TO.
Yep. But he's still good. Like 9 times out of 10, you leave him in the sky for the first turn. He comes down the second turn. He's got 5 attacks, 3s, 2s, -3, 3 damage. And we should probably go delve into the list a little bit now if I'm talking around here. So the thought, essentially my list was, how do I make Celestion Prime better? And there's no way to make him better besides fighting him twice than making him 2+ to hit, reroll 1s, 2+ to wound, reroll 1s with however many attacks he's got fighting twice.
That's pretty good though.
Do that, yeah, it's pretty good. If everything rolls right, he does 15 damage in the first round of combat and then 15 in the second. Unfortunately, when I was on stream, he didn't really get to do much except for smack a Gaunt Summoner around the head.
And then die.
He could have. He got melted. But he can do more, and in every other game, he's done a lot more than he did in that game. So yeah, that's the thought behind it. You take another mobile character that's got the artifact that gives everyone +1 hit with wholly within 12, and you take the command trait which gives them reroll 1s to wound wholly within 12.
And you put that on a Frostheart Phoenix.
I put that on a Frostheart Phoenix because he's resilient, so you get the most out of the artifacts. They last for a lot longer than they will on quite literally any other character in the book. Except maybe your personal favorite, the Flame Spire Phoenix.
But that's only if you roll a 4-up.
If you roll a 4+, yeah. Which I'm not very good at rolling. I don't know if you guys have watched the video. Not that good at rolling 4-ups. And then it kind of evolved from there. So you go from having Celestion Prime as the main character, the Frostheart Phoenix as the secondary character, who's the general with the artifacts. I then naturally go to, in every list that I run, a Celestial Hurricanum at the moment, just because it gives everything a +1 to hit within 12. It's not wholly within, so it's within 12.
So is that your main reason? The Hurricane, is it the spell as well?
The Hurricane goes in every single list. Regardless of what list I'm running, he's in every single list that I've made in the book.
Okay.
I think it's a 1+ option, in my opinion.
You just start with a Hurricane. I start every list with Geminids, and then I start writing my list. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's my 280 point Geminids. So go. Yeah. Because the shooting attack is ridiculous. 18-inch range, roll 3 dice every 2 up, D3 mortal wounds. That's just.
And it moves 10, so it's a 28 inches effective range, right?
Yeah. And so I've made other lists. There's a Phoenician list that I've got that runs it, but it's got the what's the cloak that made +4 movement and fly? That one called?
What, the Thermal Rider cloak?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So you put that on him, and then he's a 14-inch move. And flies, so you can fly over your screen. There's just so many things you can do with that model.
Yeah.
I think in my Tempest style list, it's got the Patrician's Helm, which is immune to battle shock within 12 of it. And because it's such a big footprint, it puts it out. There's just so many things you can do with that model. And the fact that it's a mage that gives itself +1 to cast as well is just for 60 points. It's just a cherry on top.
Yeah, it's genuinely very good. So what else was in the list? Hurricanum, Frostheart Phoenix, Celestion Prime.
Yep. Well, you got the Frostheart Phoenix, who's the general. So you take Phoenix Guard. I think that's a no-brainer. They work out to be roughly 7 points a wound, which are factoring in their 4-up after save, or sorry, DPR, which makes them.
Thanks for using the language. Appreciate that.
Use the terminology.
Yeah.
So they're 7 points a wound, and a lot of people say they're not worth it because they go, oh, you've got 30 guys for 420 points. That's what 14 points a wound, and it's like no. Cut that in half because I got a 4+ DPR, so they're actually 7 points a wound. So they're one of the most points efficient models defensively in the army. But then on top of that, they've also got 2 attacks, 3/3s, -1 damage. Frostheart Phoenix General can make them reroll wounds, but he also gives them +1 to hit and reroll 1s to wound. Like, it's just, synergies abound.
Yeah.
And then I just took handgunners because I like Hock and long rifles. They just trigger some people. So it's
what is it?
A mind game.
What is it about them?
Yeah, I don't know. Mine just missed the entire tournament, so
So
you can't escape.
No, that works though. Like, I don't know, like putting people off tilt. Like, so having something that can start. It does D3 damage. The hot long rifle, right?
No, 2 damage.
2 damage.
So better than D3.
Yeah. So it keeps targeting those characters, makes them feel a little bit unsecure, which is always really fun.
Yeah. And I always try and keep them within. So even if I'm stringing like 2 units out and the Hurricanum's in the middle, you keep the Hockland within 10 inches, and you can actually cover quite a bit of board space. But they get +1 because the Hurricanum's models, not units.
Yes.
But as long as you're giving your Hockland +1 to hit, he doesn't really care.
No, that's really good idea actually, especially putting them where they're put on the line. And then you've got some Shadow Warriors. Shadow Warriors, something bigged up by a lot of people on the internet. Seeing them on the tabletop, I liked what you did with them on the tabletop. Like, how did you find them over the weekend?
I think I misplayed in that game that we played. I think I misplayed the unit that was on my left flank, the one that appeared, essentially the one that was in the rice fields. Yeah. Which we were joking the whole weekend that the rice fields were speaking Elvish. Like, I don't know if people get that. It might be a little bit,
might be super nerd
on the nose, but yeah. But they were amazing the entire weekend. Like, they're just like they pop up in terrain, and the because everyone brings, like, you have 4 pieces on the table, and there are 3 from both players. You got 10 pieces of terrain between everyone. There's always ample terrain for them to pop up in, and they got 18-inch range, and they got rend 1, 110 points. Like, how are they? I don't know. I don't understand.
No, they're good. They're very, very good.
They're amazing.
But they won't survive much once they get hit.
But they got a 4. They got a 4-up in cover. So if they're in cover anyway, they got a 4-up armor save.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Fair point.
Yeah. And so when you've got half the table is enemy deployment zone, you can just put them in your half of the table, shoot stuff off, and then your opponent shoots them back. They don't run from battle shock. They just hang around.
So let's talk about your experiences over the weekend. Like, what units in your army list did particularly well? We don't need to go game by game, but to bring out some moments. And which units underperformed, and what would you think about changing?
So I didn't cast the bridge. So I had the Soul Screen bridge as well.
Yeah.
And the one game that I should have used it, which was the last game, I didn't use it. So that got dropped. I think that was more psychological than anything, but it's 80 points of psychological warfare, which I've since dropped in my list that I've revised after CanCon. I dropped 1 unit of Shadow Warriors. I found that 1 was often enough to do what I wanted, and that's either character sniping or just a backline harassment.
Yeah. So that's 180 points back. Oh no, 190 points back already.
190.
Yeah.
And so for that, I literally my list I just put in gyrocopters because I needed some horde clearing. So that was a big thing in my list, was that the Phoenix Guard were the only thing that could deal with hordes. And as we saw in the last game, if you get rid of the Phoenix Guard, I have no out to get rid of hordes. Besides, like, the Celestion Prime can do it, but that's not what he should be doing. He's to be going after big characters, essentially, is what I usually had him doing. So that's all I changed. I dropped the bridge. I dropped the 1 unit of Shadow Warriors and put in gyrocopters, and that's my list changed, and that's what I'll be running at the heats that we've got here, which are like yours, but half the size.
And unfortunately, probably still on Realm of Battle boards.
Yeah, probably less each as well.
Full of Zinch. What is it that really stood out in the list, like, that performed well against which armies?
So there was a lot of good Fire Slayers players that ended up in the top of the tournament rankings. Just because they're just such a resilient army, and they're really good in the scenarios that we played. But I find that my list actually does really well against 5 players. So I played 2 of them. One of them is against a guy called Reese, who is number 6 in Australia, I think. And he's a Legion of Asgore player. You might have spoken to him once.
Big
before.
fan.
Yeah. So he was playing Fire Slayers this tournament. He's a very good player. But I just found that the secondary role of my list was character sniping, and so like I could get rid of some with range. So 2 Hochlands, 2 units of Shadow Warriors, and the Hurricanum. But then the backup is the Frostheart and the Celestion Prime, and so essentially I just against those armies I just took out the characters, and then the rest of the army crumbles. And that was, I know that just shoot the characters is a massive meme that's going on and has been for the last like 12 months.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much my strategy for the tournament, because once you've taken out the characters, you're not generating command points, so your resource pool is effectively 0. You can't stop those battle shocks. You can't, do all the things that you want to do. You roll a 1 on your run roll, you're running 1 inch. You're not running 6. You're not re-rolling ones to hit. Like all those good things and all the good command abilities that are on characters are just wasted.
Yeah.
They're not wasted. They're dead. So they're unusable. And so that was basically my philosophy when I went into playing the list. But also resilience through the Phoenix Guard and through the Frostheart Phoenix, because they're the 2 units that most of the time don't die. But if they do die, I've probably lost the game.
Yes.
So
did you find? I mean, the Frostheart Phoenix has been a terror. And again, why we don't see more of them, it surprises me. Like, yeah, like -1 to wound in an aura, effectively 28. They got 14 wounds, 12 wounds base. 12 wounds. So effectively 24 wounds base is
exactly
is insane. And they're pretty decent in combat. I don't know why we don't see more. I've said it all the time.
I think people have a hangover. So I didn't play when they were in their previous incarnation, but I know that they were very good.
They were 100 points cheaper.
Plus armor save. Yeah, well.
For like 2 years, it was dumb. Okay.
Maybe that's why everyone's got a hang up on that, because that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was. They were just unshiftable. Okay. It was dumb, but good.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I can see that.
So they're just there. I think that's it. I think it's a hang up because they were previously so good, but now they're still, I would argue, probably too good for their points. I'd say that the Flame Spike probably needs to go down, and the Frostheart needs to go up for their points cost at the moment.
I would love that. I would deeply love that. So the Phoenix Guard as well. Like, obviously, when I did the list review show for Cities, I was like, look, these things are dumb comparison to other stuff. Like, great, really great.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, they do it. They carry the entire army. So I wasn't running a list that could bring them back because I spent my 50 points. My previous list had the Emerald Life Swarm, but I changed that for an extra command point so I could fight people more often. But just Phoenix Guards, they just carry the entire list. But when they don't, you lose. Again, that's the problem. So
yeah, I think when you're asking a unit to be the unit that blocks and holds the offensive unit, fights it, and is your objective holding unit all at the same time, you're putting it like it's a great unit to do it, but it's a little bit too much in some cases. So yeah, I understand that. All right.
But the problem with the list is I've got 1,000 points in 3 characters. So that's one of the big things.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Celestion Prime. Did he do the job that you wanted him to do over the weekend?
Yeah. Hang on, where's my? So I've got my painted ones now. So this is old mate. Look at him. He's beautiful.
He is beautiful.
It's such an amazing model. Yeah, so he did, until that last game, he did a lot of work, and I would say that.
Do you want to keep going, and I'll show you my version of my tree list of Prime. You keep talking about what he did in the game.
Yeah, so the Celestion Prime is a big threat piece, so people people often forget that he's even coming down, and he's 340 points of smash face. So as I said before, he's 2s to hit, 2s to wound, re-rolling both, and fights twice. So he can do 30 wounds worth of damage in one round.
This is my version. Yeah. This is my Treelistant Prime.
Yep, I like it.
It's Tree Lord Ancient, Hurricanum. There you go. That's from my Living City army.
Yeah, he's everything in one.
Anyway, if only.
So that's a good thing. The second thing about the Celestion, so he smashes face. The second thing is that he basically is guaranteed a charge. Again, as you saw in that last game, the 1 in 9 chance of him not rolling a 3 up 2 dice to charge happened.
Wow.
And then you have to spend a command point to re-roll them, but you can turn, essentially what you're aiming for is a 3. You drop him down, he's 9 inches away from something. His ability, I don't know what it's called, but his ability is change a dice once a turn, and you can change one of your charge dice to a 6. And I think there are a lot of people commenting in the chat on your game that you can change both dice, but I don't think that's the case, and that's not how I was playing it that weekend. I played as you can only change one of the dice, and so if I needed to, for the charge, I just need to roll 3+, turn the other one to a 6, and he goes in. So it's basically guaranteed, especially with a reroll. So it's a 1 in 9, so 1 in 81 chance of failing. So
that's pretty,
reroll.
Which is sad that you failed it twice, right?
Well, no, I failed the 1 in 9, but I didn't fail the 1 in 81.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, he got in every game. The other thing he does is the Comet Strike. So choose a point on the battlefield within 24 inches, and then everything within D6 inches of that takes D3 wounds. And so in the game that everyone saw, how I did that to effect was that he had his characters all clustered around. I put it so that even if I rolled a 1, it automatically hit 2 of them. So that's a strategy that I use with him. Essentially, you just go whatever's an inch from the most things, you just put it there, and then whatever else you get as a bonus.
Right. So as opposed to an equidistant point where you're hoping for a 3, you get yourself you guarantee yourself the most value no matter the situation.
Yep. So I basically say this is the first. So if you've got two targets that you want to hit with a third off in the corner, you go an inch away from the first one in the direction of the second, so that you're closer to the second as possible as you can get. And then your third one is whatever. It's just a bonus if you get it.
Okay.
Yeah, because Jimmy clustered his characters so closely together, I got all 3 with a roll of, I think it was a 3. I got a unit of horrors. I got 3 characters. I got lots of things. So.
Yeah, it's an amazing ability, and you can see why a lot of people are taking it part of like a bunker buster list, right? You take the Incanter, you also take the Comet as well. That now is a guaranteed amount of mortal wounds in an AoE cluster for not tons of points in an army list, effectively, which I find. It's a very, very strong and interesting build, in my opinion. Yeah. I think I'd like to see more of it. Okay, but then in combat, he just smashed face, did the work, right?
Yeah. So what he would have, if I had command points left over in the game, everyone would have seen. So essentially, he goes for a character, but then the second pile in, he attacks usually like the horde to thin it out or something that's on an objective. So he didn't get to do that in my game. That was on the stream, but in every other game he did. So essentially he goes into a character, you make him fight twice, he then piles into another unit that's within 3 inches of him, and then does the same thing again, and usually does between 9 and 15 wounds,
which is
just how everything works,
which is really genuinely decent.
Yeah, and if you spend that 1 command point for him to reroll 1s to hit, it applies in both because you're still in the combat phase. So essentially you're getting 2 command points for the price of 1 because you're fighting twice, and you don't have to spend the command point twice for each time he fights. Yeah. So it's just all about essentially command point efficiency.
Yeah, and using them together.
I played him.
Yeah, okay, it's good. Yeah. It's interesting powering up a character like that, so just one character is super strong, and his ability to never be negated starting off the board, along with the Shadow Warriors. Like, I for one, am a big proponent of things starting off the board or having good board control. I think that's always very important. Did you find that quite quintessentially important? Yeah,
so being able to null deploy. So for those people that don't understand the term, essentially you go, you can't do it. I don't think you can do it with straight Stormcast because it has to be 1 on 1 off.
Yeah.
But in the cities, all they say is that you just have to keep it off. So essentially my first 3 deploys with the list is Shadow Warriors, Celestion Prime, and your opponent's deployed often 4 units because they would go first sometimes. And then you know where I have a very reactionary style of play. So just my entire style of play is very reactionary.
Okay.
And so I quite like to know where my opponent's putting things so that I can respond to that and place things down. And so being able to null deploy 3 of my 9 units is massive.
Yeah, no, it's similar. Like, I think a poor strategy is a race to the bottom for the 1-drops, like we're seeing obviously with Tzeentch. We'll talk more about that later. But the strategy, I think, is you either try to beat them, which you can't, so then you should race to the top and just put as many things down that are chaff or you can afford to put down or off the board before they can see what your strategy is. Because there's some really clever, especially having played other editions, there's a whole bunch of clever deployment strategies like denied flank, dead drops. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't really see, or we haven't really encapsulated into terminology in Age of Sigmar necessarily.
Yep. And so I played a bit of that when I played the Fire Slayer players, because a lot of them, actually the two lists that I played against had 2 blocks of Hearthguard Berserkers and then a block of Volkite Berserkers. And like, they're not going to place their characters first. They always have to, you always place units first. And so they put down their big blocks, and I know exactly where the big blocks are. Like, they're telegraphing what units they're going for. And then I can respond to that in like. And so in a couple of them, I played a refused flank, and it worked quite well. The one that you have to get characters onto the objectives.
Yes. Three places of power.
Yeah. And so all I did in that game, he got his one character to the objective on the left flank. I killed him and then just ignored that objective for the rest of the game. And so he had a big unit of 30 Volkite Berserkers on that objective that weren't doing anything. And so I pushed hard on the other 2 objectives and just capped them for the rest of the game. So and again, that was the part of the reactionary kind of play that I like to do. Okay,
so you ended up winning 5 games?
Yeah.
5 games, and you lost to the eventual winner, Jimmy the Page, and what I thought was one of the best games I've ever streamed. So thank you to you, and also obviously to James as well, for a fantastic game of Warhammer. Looking back on it, do you think there's some things you could have done differently?
At least 20. Yeah.
Which is a sign of someone who cares about what they're doing, right?
Yeah. So I like, and this is why I have to thank you, because having the stream allows me to go back and watch my game and see where I've made an error. And when I played competitive War Machine, we used to just video record a lot of battle reports just for that pure purpose, to go back and look at it and review and see how we went. And one thing that people might see from the very beginning is that the last thing that and this is probably a big thing, when I had more drops, so we were talking about the race to the top, I could have left my small battle mage that was near the arcane terrain out of 30 inches of any dispelling attempts from his wizards, and just cast the bridge first turn, bridged over, and gone for the super alpha, essentially.
Yeah.
But I deployed him within 30 inches because I don't know why.
Which is always goes against, like, I don't know if you watched it, me and Darren did a show about deployment. It's up on YouTube, and I encourage people to watch it. My first piece of advice, or our first piece of advice, is always deploy with purpose. Like something has a job, put it on the table to do that job. So the deployment phases, I think the deployment phase sometimes takes less. I see less people putting more time into it than I think that they should. That's no criticism of you. That's just a good lesson to always learn, right?
Oh, I think it's probably close to the most important phase of the game, and you only get one, and any mistakes that you make are with you for the rest of the game. So.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so that's good. Also, another side note question. You were using our circular objective markers. I know they're already really prevalent in War Machine and Horde. Did you find those useful for securing objectives or knowing where they were?
Yeah, they're great. I think everyone should be using them. I know that as a standard, Age of Sigmar players are more, even if they don't want to admit it, they're more narrative based than a lot of other games. Like, there's a lot of, people frown upon 2D terrain to represent things. Like, people want a level of immersion.
I think, as do I, by the way, like, big into it.
Yeah, and I know that you're a proponent, and we've talked about this, on Twitter before. But there are alternatives that aren't just clear, that are, like stone work and stuff like that. Like, I just want people to know that there are, neoprene alternatives that you can find.
Here's a nice example on this. We've got here a print. It's got some gold, so Nathan would be happy. It's on a bit of stonework. Yeah, I personally, I don't like the mats that have got, like, they say army painter on them or some logo for a stream.
Yeah. No. We're not 40k players.
No.
Bit of a dig there. No. I think that they are probably one of the greatest additions to the game that you can have. The only problem is in Age of Sigmar is that when you've got shifting objectives, they become a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Like Greasy Goblin, like, you just can't use it, so you just wouldn't bother. But the ones where you can burn objectives, they become an issue. Like, that's the problem. It's just that if you had static objectives for 5 rounds, then they would be perfect.
Yeah, no, I agree. I having watched, like, done a weekend of streaming with them, more than one weekend now, I find them to be fantastic, and I also see the players, I think, playing better. They move to move with purpose a little bit, a little bit more. So I got to say, I just wanted to get your feedback on them again, and for people to hear what they thought.
It just takes cognitive load off because you can see the boundaries at every time. You know if something's in or if it's not. And when you've got something like that, you can also state. So, I'm just sorry, tangent. I really like when people discuss intent during a game.
Yeah.
So when you've moved a model within 6 inches, I always verbalize to my opponent at that point, this model is intended to be within 6 inches, and that's how I've moved it.
Yeah.
If the model or the objective gets bumped, this model is within 6 inches. And so that's probably something that I've gotten from playing those other games. And I don't think I see that enough in Age of. I haven't seen that enough in Age of Sigmar, except for my last game against Jimmy.
Playing to intent is something I think we all should be doing and expressing.
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely, I agree. I also like to touch on a little point you just said there, that Age of Sigmar players are a little bit more narrative maybe than other game systems. I'd say what's great about that is that because the game system itself is narratively based, I think one of the elegant powers of Age of Sigmar, and if you take the 2 Games Workshop games, well, not the only 2, but 40k and Age of Sigmar, interestingly, Age of Sigmar, you have power through narrative. So if you take a Cities of Sigmar army, for example, you get all these bonuses, as you pointed out, for being inside that army as opposed to in mixed order. And I think I personally find that's a genius bit, which they've just started to move obviously into 40k with the pure marine codexes, and I'm sure there'll be some pure codexes in the future as well. That's the clever way, but it also allows them to hopefully, obviously they don't do it great sometimes, but more balance the books as there's less permutations.
Well, so this has been ongoing in War Machine for years now, and essentially they came out with the new edition, and they made essentially mini allegiances within every book, similar to what they're doing now. But the guys that were designing the game over in the States said that they were able to better internally balance it because they knew that the majority of the time, it's a bit different because there were very specific models you could take in their list, but they were able to balance the models better because they knew what they would be playing within the same list based on these, that they were called theme lists.
Yeah.
And apparently for the designers, it makes it easier to balance things. I don't know if that works in Age of Sigmar as much, but I like to think it does.
Yeah, I like to think it does, but most importantly, I like that it's a Sylvaneth army versus an Uruk army, and those are the models that you see. Like I think that's a beautiful piece of game design, and I'll always compliment Games Workshop on deciding to do that. I think it's really clever. Okay, so post CanCon, like, what are your thoughts? What do you want to do? Like, how do you see Age of Sigmar at the moment?
So I think I put out, I must have tweeted 3 months ago that I thought the game was, and it's a bit of a conceit coming from me because I've only played the game for a year, but it's one of the closest to the most balanced games that I have ever played. And then Zench came out, but before that, I think they're spot of the money, because the Slaanesh FAQ just came out. I think that they've been brought fairly well back into line, except for Selesky's host. But let's not talk about that. Yeah. For the most part, I think the game is very well balanced. You can take essentially any army in the game at the moment, except for maybe Beasts of Chaos, and get very and place competitively. And so I think the game's in a great place. Obviously, the release schedule last year was a bit insane, and I'd like to see them slow down a bit.
Seems like they're not
on that front. No, they're not. But I'd like to see them slow down.
There's even books that aren't even really battle tomes in Wrath of Everchosen. They're like, just here's more stuff. You're like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a really good positive, especially from some of the more competitive players, because obviously there's discussions left, right, and centre about especially the Tzeentch book. I'd like to hear your thoughts about how do you feel about the Tzeentch book, especially now we're in the post FAQ world on Tzeentch. What did you think about the book before? What did you hope for the FAQ, and what happened?
Pre-FAQ, I'd never played them before. I had heard on your show and others that the change host was an issue. I had no idea why it was an issue. All I know is that hero phases were taking 2.5 hours. That was basically all I knew. I'd been making, because I was looking at Tzeentch, so I've always wanted, I'm an order player at heart, but Tzeentch has always had a special spot because I just love Magic. Magic is fun. It's magical. Wow, I almost just said that.
It's a kind of magic.
It's fantastical.
Great, good.
The key part of fantasy is magic. And when I used to play games, I was always a mage. When I used to play back in Hero Quest, I was always the sorcerer, like just that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like I have a picture on my wall of just a classic fire mage. It's just, yeah, I agree.
And like that classic G-dub fire mage as well that was in Warhammer Online, but he was also the old model, like the guy with the basket on his head.
Yeah.
Like he's just like it's just a quintessential fantastical character. And so that's why I like Zench. And so I was making a change host list before the tournament, and actually before my game with Jimmy, I was talking to him about my list and like getting his feedback on it, which I've since canned because I don't like the playstyle I played against them. I won't say it wasn't fun because I did actually enjoy that game, but I enjoyed that game on a level that it was a puzzle that I was trying to solve, like that. Back to that baseline concept. But I don't think that in the previous incarnation that they were a fun game for anyone to play against who doesn't think the way that I do. And I think that's the majority of people don't think the same way that I do.
Okay.
And so people having negative experiences. Like I saw, who was the guy that was playing Zench with Archaon on the table next to us?
Oh,
at Cancun?
I don't remember.
I can't remember. Anyway.
Whirlwind.
See, that list is just, it's just beautiful. So essentially, if you get 2 6s on a Destiny dice, you just remove any character. Then I think round 5 got paired up against Nagash, just couldn't catch him. And he had his two 6s in his Destiny dice pool. The Slayer of Kings was just getting revved up, waiting.
Just waiting.
And it never did anything.
Did not happen.
Yeah. So I think, but post FAQ, I submitted a quite lengthy essay to Ben Johnson and the FAQ team with my thoughts. 2 of them were taken on board for the FAQ, but they were the ones that everyone else was suggesting as well. But I think it's brought them more into line. I think they're still very much a powerhouse, and I look forward to playing many more games against them. But I think stopping Destiny dice from Battle Shock is huge. It would have affected the outcome of our game quite significantly. It would have, because I think there were 4 individual occasions where he used Destiny dice to just pass Battle Shock. So I'm just going to go into that a little bit more. So when you've got that Destiny dice can't be used for Battle Shock anymore. Well, sorry, is modified for Battle Shock. You then have to start thinking about your command points because Zench aren't routinely generating command dice very quickly. You get 1 a turn, and when you've got a Lord of Change and Change Host, you're choosing to spend either 1 command point on the Lord of Change's ability or saving it for Battle Shock.
Or you've got the Fate Master who's giving those rerolls out.
There you go.
Yeah, which I think is actually even more important where the CP gets used, truth be told.
Exactly.
I agree with you. And I said so much on that actual stream of your game. I was like, giving an army another resource for CP management is it's bonkers. Which is again
I think Jimmy also used it for an armor save at least once, if not twice, to pass the unmodified armor save as well. So
big deals. Big deals, yeah. I think the post-Zinch world is going to be very interesting, especially that Flamer gun line. We've looked at, you're going to show me some flamers now. a bag of flamers.
12 metal flamers.
Yeah, the Flamer gun line, which I don't think... So, interestingly, and I think I've said this on the show already, but I'll say it one more time. When I did the review show for the Zinch book, the first thing I did was write change host lists, which was scouting units, many drops. I wasn't going for change host. I was just going for more units in that army. So I was already going against that grain. Unfortunately, though, and where that fits into the negative play experience and is really oddly confused by some people on the internet, is that a whole bunch of armies don't have access to units or abilities to do that.
No.
So, if you don't have those capacities, there is a big negative play experience available there, and I'm sure we're going to see more of that in the future.
Shout out to the Stormcast players, the Endless Spell, which you've probably never played, the Celestion Vortex Whirlwind.
Yeah.
What's that one called? 40 points of pure win in the Zench meta. So essentially, it's got a 24-inch range, I think, effective. But the key thing is that it does D3 wounds to chaos units within an inch, but it also does -1 to missile attacks within 6 inches.
Okay, and wow,
so
that's a great shout.
Anti-chaos spell. Yeah, 40 points. Anti-chaos, it does D3 mortal wounds to everything it touches, and then it also, everything goes within an inch of, but then it also does -1 to shooting attacks. So your flamers and your horrors are going to be hitting at -1, in addition to any other -1s to hit you've got.
Bit Geminids, cheeky Geminids. Yes, I think, which is why those big blocks of 12 I don't think are the right shout. I think those blocks of 3 flamers are going to be the terror. But we already saw Jimmy do those little MSU 3s. Okay, so Pointy Elves coming out soon. There's Wrath of Everchosen, Seraphon. Yes. What is it that
Sons of Bahamut.
Sons of Behemoth. Yeah, Bahamut.
Yeah.
But you generally, apart from seeing, you see the game being in a really solid place.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. The danger. So they play it. They seem to play it safe when they re-release a book, but then they seem to go balls deep and release a new army, which I guess makes sense because that's where their main revenue is going to be, is from those new models. And every time they're getting better at casting models,
I'll stop you there.
I'm not saying there's power creep.
No, I think what you're doing, and I have this conversation all the time, so I want to just put my flag in the sand.
Go.
Again, the concept that they release rules or models with the idea that they're going to be really good and sell, so they're going to write rules to make them sell. It seems to make sense when you're looking at only the powerful things that get released, but when you look at the swath of, have you ever seen a Beast of Nurgle model?
I have, but no.
Okay, or Horticulate Slimmix.
Sake of argument.
Yeah, Puskull Blightlords. I could literally point out new release models.
How about the new Magister from Aether War? I think he's pretty decent, but you're never going to see him competitively.
Okay.
And not in new model.
Yeah, Carrick Acolytes are another good example, right? They've sold a lot. They've sold a lot of Skyfires and Enlightened at this stage. Yeah, but they still haven't sold a lot of Carrick Acolytes. Yeah. So
secret tech.
Yes. But that's what. Whenever I have that conversation, I'm always like, oh, okay.
No. I don't think there's a sinister purpose behind what they do in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I don't think they have the ability to be sinister. That's my argument.
Well, yeah. So I look forward to new releases. Have new rules. They have new interactions with the game. They change the puzzle. In my head, they change the puzzle so that I need to solve a new problem.
They do,
and that's what I enjoy. So
same.
I'm excited.
Yeah, good. Me too. Metagaming is really fun, and building lists for that environment is very exciting. Also, finding lists that, as you've pointed out, that are a positive play experience for myself, because I'm not really an Alpha Strike player. I find just being able to just table my opponent on the first turn just doesn't in any way interest me. That's not a fun.
It's not fun, is it?
No, because I want a challenge. I want something that genuinely is like a back and forth, and it's my decision-making process that does the job. No criticism to people that want to play that way, but I just can't imagine it being an entertaining time.
No, so I actually learnt that lesson at the first CanCon when I had the spiders, because they had a thing where I could get a first turn charge off fairly reliably because they can run and charge, and you can turn their run into a 6, and they get extra move with the general and all those different things, and it just it won me games. The alpha was a very powerful tool, but it just wasn't as fun as I played with for Squigs, for example. The game just wasn't as fun.
There we go. So, if you are out there listening, both of us, I think, would suggest find yourself that's something that's engaging for yourself and also engaging for your opponent, because you'll have more interest. There will be people who won't take this advice and don't care, which is fine.
Yeah.
You go crazy, but for me, it's that because I look at those flamers and I think, because I've got them. I've got the flamers, I've got the horrors. I've got a tournament coming up. I could just easy mode it and have a great time, but I definitely want to not do that.
So there is that easy mode build in Cities of Sigmar as well.
Oh yeah,
which I have
the Halahart
ready to go. It's either Halahart or Tempesai. Both are viable options, but it's just all shooting, and all you do is basically just you mass your shooting. You have a Soul Screen Bridge, and you can just wipe entire armies off the table.
But what do you learn from that other than you can do it, which you already know?
And it can have a hard counter. If you've got something that can get to that big block of shooting stuff, it's game over. And so the more balanced version I've got is in Hallowheart. Even though Hallowheart is broken, I think the people who are building Hallowheart with this mage spam are doing it the wrong way. I think you take a few good mages that are casting twice with the bonuses to cast, and you flesh out the rest of it with units. But that's a discussion for another time.
Okay.
But I think, I think that's one of the reasons why I like the Cities of Sigmar book, because when you're playing in a meta that evolves as quickly as the one is at the moment, you need to be able to react to it. And it's just, there are so many options in that book.
Yeah, so many.
It's all right.
So many options.
I just love that book. I'm in love. Like, it's just...
I think Cities of Sigmar players get more in love with their book as time goes on as well.
I've got at least 20 lists in my phone, and I think one of the Just Play guys, who is it that plays Cities of Sigmar?
Ian.
Ian, he's the same. He's got like 20 lists in his phone at any one time. Every single one of them is different and does a different thing. Like, I've got my living cities with Durthu, like swinging his sword, around. I've got a living city as well that's got like Dracothian Guard. I've got Temperside that's got the list that you're going to play against at Brishammer.
Only if you're on the top tables, mate.
Hopefully, has 3 Grunstock gun haulers in it.
Wow, 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like, this is the thing. Like, there's just so much you can do with the book, and this is why I harp on a lot on fucking Twitter about Lethus, but I need to have eels and sharks in my Cities of Sigmar army. That's why I want Lethus just so badly.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. But they're already too good. Like, I'd like to see a turtle in the Cities of Sigmar. That'd be rad.
I'll take a turtle. I'll take
2 turtles.
Yeah, that's it. It's just such a good book, and it responds to the meta well. It's well poised. Like, I still think that from those 2 books that the Auric War Clans is like the number one. It's probably close to number 1 book in the meta at the moment, isn't it? Like, it's
very
so
strong.
Good.
It's very strong. Like, it's dangerous. Like, and it's like we did coverage of that, of I feel the Auric War Clans on the live stream for the different tournaments very effectively over a couple of week period when it came out. We saw Eric Kroger's list do very well. We saw the
60-inch moving Rogue Idol.
Yeah, we saw that. That's slightly different as as a build. But yeah, we saw some incredibly solid play. Obviously, we saw them take out Bloodshed as well. So a really strong army, but they don't fly. And
but they do fly in the right list.
Well, kind of. They kind of fly, yeah. I would say that I say that they're mitigated by the fact that you can screen them, which is nice. Keeps them honest.
Yeah,
I'd actually say that they're the most honest army in the game at the minute. They're pretty straight up and down, but super strong. +1 damage.
They just fight you, don't they? They just fight you better than anything else fights you.
Yeah, +1 damage. Yeah. What the hell?
Yeah.
2s at 2s. It's like, okay, I'm here for the party. All right. Yeah. So, any advice for anyone who wants to play going forward, or do you think there's so much more for you to learn in this game?
Oh, there's always more to learn. Yeah. There's always more to learn. Everybody, if you haven't played at a tournament, go and play at a tournament. Like, I know that tournaments sometimes get a bad rap, but CanCon was 240 people and there wasn't a bad soul in there. I'd be surprised if anybody got less than maximum sports points for the entire tournament. Everybody, at least in Australia, I can't speak internationally, but in Australia, everyone's just great and very accepting, and everyone's down for games. So just get out there and play games.
Hells yeah. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
Which is why I think we've seen the scene explode over the past couple of years, realistically. Yeah. It's a fun game and everyone's there for a laugh. Sam, I just want to thank you loads for being on the show. Love to hear more from you at some point.
I'll be back on if you'll have me.
Oh,
so.
Of course. You've done
I'll bring the dogs next time as well. So.
More dogs, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you loads for being on the show. Appreciate it tons. If you have enjoyed the show or you'd like to get at Simon, if you wanted to get at you, how do we do that? On Twitter?
I'm going to have to spell now. So it's...
Well, I'll include it in the show note. At
Zweihander Hall. So ZWEIHANDERHALL. It's the German name for the double-handed wavy broadsword.
Yeah, if you've ever played Soul Calibur, that's the Zweihander.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, Zweihander.
Yeah, Zweihander. And I'm sure you'd be open to people reaching out to you and talking about cities.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. People have already started to chat with me. Like, people have already started painting up their Celestion Primes, and they've been sending me pictures. So, like, it's great. It's
nice. That's what I love about doing the streams. I think that they connect more people. They make more people, which I'm a fan of. So I think expect to hear more big things from Simon over in Australia if you haven't heard of him yet. I can't wait to kick his ass at Brishammer, which I'll be attending, which will be really fun. If you have been listening, big thank you. Make sure you stay hydrated. And of course, thank you to everyone on the Honest Wargamer Patreon. You helped me do this for a job. Really appreciate it. Always stop by and support the show. That would be huge. Thank you very much. Have a great day. See you later, Simon.
See you later, guys.